2025 seems to have been the year of reveal. A lot was exposed. Now, it looks like 2026 is going to be the year of regime change. But is that necessarily a good thing, or is it bad? Buckle up, bumpy road ahead. Here we go.
In a stunning late-night operation, I had some friends of mine execute a raid on my neighbor Tom's house. He put up quite a fight, but we got through, and he's in custody. I haven't liked what he's been doing over there for a while now, so I've decided to run his house myself. He leaves his Christmas lights up too long. He never trims his avocado tree that hangs over my fence, and I believe he's running fentanyl out of there. I can't prove the last one, but it makes sense. I've seen him speak Spanish. I got rid of the wife as well. I didn't really have a problem with her, but we did do a 4th of July block party, and she brought empanadas, so better safe than sorry. I've got them at a Residence Inn a couple towns over. I've been using his home as my own little man cave. Pretty great. It turns out he has a fantastic wine cellar that I have tapped into extensively. Anyway, I'll be running his home until a time when I can have a safe, judicious turnover to some other guy, which probably won't be happening soon. And just a heads up, I plan to take over some other neighbors' homes as well. Phil, across the street, has a pretty cool car I'd like to be in charge of. And Alex, who lives catty corner from me, has a wife who's a yoga instructor. Be taking that one soon. Again, doing it for the good of the neighborhood, so stay tuned.
Welcome. I am Dena, and you are tuned into another discussion with Dena. Well, it seems 2026 is off to a most interesting start. In light of recent events that are taking place in this country, I thought it would be a good idea to hear other people's thoughts as well as their views about the current situation at hand. Let's take a listen.
Breaking news. Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro has been captured by U.S. forces. President Trump confirming the large-scale U.S. military operation overnight.
So, I am out of town with my family, but I woke up at 3 a.m. last night feeling really worried. And so I checked the news, as someone like me does, only to find out that America had bombed Venezuela and kidnapped their president and first lady. And as someone younger than me asked the internet this morning, is this what it felt like when America invaded Iraq in the 90s? And the short answer is no. In fact, not at all. I was a teenager when America invaded Iraq, and it was terrible and scary to go to war. But it had been in the news for months. There had been protests against it, arguments made on both sides, and ultimately Congress had voted on it, as they are supposed to do. If our country wants to go to war, the American Constitution, which is literally the operating manual for the nation, is very clear that only Congress can decide that. Only Congress, with the power of the purse, with the elected representatives of the people, can make such a serious decision. This attack we just launched on Venezuela went through nobody. This is America gone rogue. This is America acting like Russia, taking Georgia or going to war with Ukraine. This is America saying, forget international law and autonomy of independent nations. Might makes right, and we will take what we want when we want. The only similarity between this and the 90s is back then we were lied to about weapons of mass destruction as a danger to the United States. And this time we're being lied to as drugs as a danger to the United States. But both were cover stories for U.S. attacks over oil and money, and in Venezuela's case you can add rare minerals. But the Bush government at least had enough respect for the American Republic and the rule of law to take the time to fabricate what appeared to be a legitimate reason to do a terrible thing. The Trump government has been acting like madmen since the beginning, just indiscriminately murdering people in the Caribbean, claiming to be protecting America from drugs coming out of Venezuela, while simultaneously pardoning the leader of Honduras, who was in jail for actually trafficking drugs to Venezuela. The Trump administration didn't even bother to take this world-changing step from the Situation Room of the White House, the place where one would take a decisive first-strike action or declare war. Trump did it from his country club in Florida and informed the American people via tweet. We kidnapped the albeit questionable and corrupt elected leader of an independent democratic nation after attacking them unprovoked in the middle of the night. There is no precedent for that in our history. And now our president is saying that we're just going to run their country until this gets sorted out. And as Jessica Craven pointed out online, we don't have the money for healthcare in America, but we have the money to run another nation? This is why we needed congressional approval for this spending. But nope, we didn't get that. We're being run by a dictator and the American taxpayer is paying for the privilege of doing it. I do think it should also be noted that it appears our military, under Pete Hegseth, is willing to take illegal orders.
Now,
and this action makes it very...
is insisting that the main reason he's interested in Venezuela, the main reason the US is kind of looking at tankers off the coast of Venezuela comes back to drugs, the trade, the smuggling of illegal drugs out of Venezuela. But what if it's not just that? Maybe there's something else going on. What if it's partly about oil? Now, on the surface, you might be thinking, why does America even need Venezuelan oil? And I can kind of understand your point, because if you look at just total oil production, like this is up until 2005, the US was there, Venezuela was there, Saudi Arabia was there. But as you probably know, since then, everything has changed. Look, American output has gone through the roof, way above Saudi Arabia. And Venezuela has gone basically to the floor. And that's kind of post-Chavez, Maduro. They're one of the minnows now, I think 21st biggest producer in the world. So again, that question, why should America care? Well, in the US, that big rise is largely down to this. It's down to the shale revolution. So you've got fracking all around the US producing extraordinary amounts of crude oil. And here's where we get to the interesting bit. Because when you're thinking about crude oil, maybe you're just thinking about, well, look, barrels of oil. It's all the same, isn't it? Well, actually, no. So if you kind of look at crude oil, there are various different types of crude in different parts of the world. There's actually kind of various different ways you can categorize it. But one way you can look at it is look at the kind of density. So you're basically looking at how thick that crude is. And when I say thick, I mean literally how thick. This is just showing you global production broken down by the density of that oil. And so you've got the kind of medium stuff. And this is probably, if you've got kind of image in your mind of what crude oil looks like, it's a bit like this, it's kind of black, but it's not too viscous, it flows around. But there's other stuff as well. So this is light crude. And it kind of almost looks like a smoothie, doesn't it? And that's the same stuff. This is still crude oil, but down to the kind of geological and the biological conditions in the ground when it was being formed, hundreds of millions of years ago, it comes out looking a bit different. And so that's light. You've also got heavy stuff. And it's kind of relatively small in global production, but this is gloopy, super viscous stuff. Heavy oil, so heavy, medium, light. Remember that. And remember also, the key thing here is, you get it out of the ground, it may look like that, but ultimately, you still need it to go into, someone's car, or indeed, be turned into chemicals. Basically, you need to process it. And that processing, that happens in places like this, in refineries. And there are refineries all over the world, of course. There are refineries all over the US as well. There's kind of more than 100 of them. And if we kind of look at where those refineries are, well, so there's some in California. So the history in America, actually, historically, a lot of the early Californian oil, that was the heavy, gloopy stuff. And if you look at kind of some of the refineries in America, so here are some of the refineries. There's one in LA there. These are the 10 biggest. You've got some up here around kind of towards Canada. That we'll kind of come to that in a second. But a lot of them are down there, kind of Texas, Louisiana, on the coast. And here's the critical thing. These refineries are primarily set up for heavy oil, for taking that gloopy stuff and turning it into gasoline and all of the other different products. But here's where things get interesting. Remember that chart I showed you a moment ago, the one which showed kind of shale oil and how it kind of went through the roof? The oil that's generally produced with shale oil, the fracking oil, that comes out of the ground mostly in the light form. So it's the smoothie. It's sometimes actually even clear. It comes out of the ground clear rather than black. And that's the majority of American production right now. Shale oil tends to be light stuff. And actually that's kind of going back 10 years. Look at where we are now. Look at those bars. In the last few years, the amount of light oil being produced in the US has gone up and up and up, and the amount of heavy stuff has gone down. But back to those refineries, they need to be fed. If America's going to have gasoline, it needs to feed those refineries with heavy oil. So if you look at the kind of imports coming into America in recent years, even though America is producing so much oil, more oil than it ever produced before, it still needs to suck in loads of oil from overseas. And the type of oil we're talking about, it used to be, it's mostly heavy crude. It used to be only 12%. So only 12% of imports were heavy, gloopy crude. Now, it's about 70%. So 70% of the oil coming into America, which it needs to basically keep its economy going, is heavy crude. And where does heavy crude come from? Well, here are some of the big countries where you find most of it. It's Canada and Venezuela, come back to. But it's Canada and it's Venezuela where you get most of this heavy crude oil, which is why I'm about to think about where those refineries are. They're mostly set up kind of, you've got some in the north there to get the heavy oil coming out of Canada, and you've got some around the kind of Louisiana and elsewhere and Texas to get that heavy oil that comes in from Venezuela. That was kind of the way they were set up. And it's really expensive to rebuild these things. You can't just chuck out a refinery very easily overnight. Some came from Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico as well, and that was pretty heavy too. So that's the picture in America. And the upshot is, even though America's producing more and more oil, the imports, this is showing you imports of oil into America, are still really high. And if you break down those imports by the country that stuff is coming from, well, there's Venezuela, and it used to be a decent slug, actually more coming from Venezuela just about than from Canada, just at the turn of the millennium. But now look at what's happened since. Right now, Canada has gone from 15% of all of the US imports of oil to 61%. 61%, and Venezuela's basically next to nothing. But here's what's tantalizing, and here's the reason I think that a lot of people are looking towards Venezuela and thinking, well, there's more to this than just drugs. Look at total oil reserves around the world. The higher these bars are, the more oil there is in the ground, so that hasn't yet been taken out of the ground. So there you've got Saudi, Iran, Iraq, all of the usual suspects. But the biggest of all, and this is according to various different sources, the biggest of all is Venezuela. And what's that oil? It's the heavy, tarry stuff that you might want to put into those American refineries. And there is really only one other place in the world that has a kind of serious amount of heavy oil other than Canada and Venezuela. And lo and behold, guess where that is? It's Russia.
After explosions rocked the capital of Caracas and surrounding states early this morning, President Trump is expected to hold a news conference from Mar-a-Lago at 11 a.m. this morning. But first, he joins us now by phone, and let's get right to the President of the United States, Donald Trump. President Trump, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning.
So you've had quite a busy evening. Tell us about it.
It was slightly busy, I would say. It was very dark all over, especially in Venezuela. The team did an incredible job. They rehearsed and practiced like nobody's ever seen. And I was told by real military people that there's no other country on earth that can do such a maneuver. If you would have seen what happened, I mean, I watched it literally like I was watching a television show. And if you would have seen the speed, the violence, you know, they say that, the speed, the violence, they use that term. It's it was an amazing thing, an amazing job that these people did. There's nobody else could have done anything like it.
You're at Mar-a-Lago right now. How were you able to watch this?
Well, we watched it from a room. We had a room and we watched it, and we watched every aspect of it. We were surrounded by lots of people, including generals, and they knew everything that was happening, and it was very complex, extremely complex, the whole maneuver, the landings, the number of aircraft, which were a massive number, the number of helicopters, a different type of helicopters, different type of fighter jets. We had a fighter jet for every possible situation. And they just broke in, and they broke into places that were not really able to be broke into, you know, with steel doors that were put there for just this reason, and they got taken out in a matter of seconds.
If the United States can conduct an operation in Venezuela to capture Nicolas Maduro, an elected president, and put him on trial in American courts, then why is it impossible to capture Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel and bring him before international court?
Guess the religion of the judge who's going to be presiding over the sham trial of Venezuela's leader, Maduro. It's not surprising. Maduro's being held in New York City and D.C., Brooklyn. Same place Luigi Mangione is currently at. Also same place Puff Daddy was, and only a couple miles from the prison Epstein spent his last days. But let's look at how Israel is behind every single aspect of the Venezuela takeover and how they benefit. The next ZOG leader to be put in place is Maria Machado. Look, she's even doing the Anna Kasparian meme. She's guilty already. Why do they all do that? In 2020, she signed an alliance agreement with Netanyahu's Likud party. Netanyahu came to America to visit Trump in Florida. We can see now that was to secure his final orders on such a big move. And the same night that Netanyahu left was the same night that America bypassed Congress to airstrike a foreign country, kidnap its leader and his wife, and declare themselves the new rulers of Venezuela. They bypassed Congress to do this. And AIPAC Congress will not do a single thing about it, because Congress operates for Israel.
For the next few weeks, the U.S. media is going to tell you over and over again that the Venezuelan people support the overthrow of their own government. So let me explain to you why that's bullshit and how they lie about this.
Certainly scenes of elation here this morning, Peter. Some people telling us they were out here as early as around 2 a.m. as that news started to come.
Certainly scenes of elation here, Peter. We've got about 4 people jumping in a circle at a gas station. This crowd may seem small, but in terms of CIA money, they are mighty. Meanwhile, the streets of Venezuela actually look like this, as thousands of people are going out and protesting in favor of the government and against U.S. intervention. But the U.S. media and clowns like this will never show you a glimpse of that. What they do is pay people to condemn the government and then film them, usually zoomed in so you can't see how small the crowd is, and then tell you that everybody in Venezuela supports the U.S. invading their own country. But let's look at the actual polling data, shall we? 90% of Venezuelans rejected U.S. intervention and said that Venezuela should be defended by any means necessary. That is what the vast majority of their country believes. The only ones who want it overthrown are the traitors and sellouts who are taking CIA or NED money. And the US has dumped millions of dollars into Venezuela to try and create these bad acts.
But the Venezuelan people are celebrating the kidnapping of Maduro and the bombing of their country. Except they're not. The people who you're seeing celebrating are in Miami, they're not in Venezuela. As I said in this comment, there's only 2 types of Venezuelans that are celebrating right now. The old white elite that benefited from the looting of their country by American corporations because they were basically the house slaves. And 2, extremely confused, poor Venezuelans who are facing the economic hardships created by almost the 1,000 sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on Venezuela, and who have been duped by the opposition media into blaming the government and not the United States. In either case, let me show you what the media is not going to show you, which is how Venezuelans are actually reacting to the kidnapping of their president. So that's how the actual people in Venezuela are feeling right now. This is why it's so stupid.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. Our current strategy of nation building and regime change is a proven absolute failure.
We will break the cycle of regime change.
We must abandon the failed policy of nation building and regime change that Hillary Clinton pushed in Iraq, in Libya, in Egypt,
and in Syria. Regime change takes chaos. You've seen how that works over the last 20 years. That hasn't been too good.
Not a reckless interventionist globalism.
We're getting out of the nation-building business. We're going to stay until such time as the proper trend.
Something ain't adding up. Anyways, it just dawned on me. And maybe I'm the only one, okay? But am I the only one who's wondering how in the world did these protesters get these highly produced signs so fast? No. Let's run down the timeline, okay? Help me do the math, okay? Maybe my math is bad, but there is no way these people can't be paid. So Donald Trump, President Trump, he captured Maduro at around 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, okay? Because he loved to do stuff in the middle of the night. So 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, Trump captured Maduro. By 7 a.m., a few hours later, thousands of people across America were in the streets with highly produced signs saying no war in Venezuela, no blood for oil. How in the hell can they either have the equipment in their bedrooms to make these signs, but there is no way in the world that a president of the United States of America, the commander-in-chief, okay, can capture a narco dictator at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then by 7 a.m., a bunch of lunatic, unhinged liberals have all kind of signage, highly produced, about Venezuela and with Maduro's name printed on it and all highly, good quality print too. How did they get them that fast?
If I begin 2026 on a personal note, to all intents and purposes, this morning, Venezuela is an American colony. I've got mixed feelings about that. Whatever the White House says, I don't think this is really about drugs. It's about oil. Full disclosure, my family came to England from Guyana, the country next door to Venezuela. It's where I grew up and where I went to school. It's also where I learnt to handle a rifle. For almost 2 centuries, Venezuela has claimed more than half of Guyana's territory, the Essequibo region, as its own. My generation grew up preparing for an invasion. But I don't think anyone really thought we'd go to war over impenetrable rainforest. And then, in 2015, American companies hit oil in Guyanese waters. At 30 billion barrels, it's one of the biggest oil finds in decades. Unsurprisingly, Caracas immediately rediscovered its enthusiasm for Guyanese territory, even redrawing the map of Venezuela sent to every school to include Essequibo. So I don't think there's much doubt what is driving Mr. Trump's military adventure. He wants to protect America's vast oil interests in the region and to feed his refineries with Venezuelan crude. And if that means upsetting the international rules-based order, I don't think Mr. Trump will be too bothered. After all, American presidents, including Democrats like Kennedy and Obama, have always been clear on one thing. The first rule of the rules-based order is that America makes the rules to suit America.
Riddle me this, Batman. Explain to me how, after Trump goes into Venezuela in the middle of the night, a couple of hours later, in New York, you have an organized march with thousands of people with banners, signs, flags, and the signs are all matching. They've all been printed. They were at the same print press. Who's working overtime? Who's setting this up? Are these guys paid? Like, there is no way that you can get all these people and have all these signs overnight. I'm sorry, and not even a couple of hours. These people were out in the morning. Trump was going to Venezuela at 2 or 3 in the morning. And these people were out by 7, 8, 9? Organized? Bro, who's doing this? I'm sorry, this is not organic. Not one freaking bit is this organic. And they were all over Times Square. Like, look at this. Look at these signs. Perfect. All matching. Listen, if they were handwritten, fine. But they're printed. And they have long banners as well.
Greenland and the Premier of Denmark and other Danish officials are responding to a Twitter post from your wife, Katie Miller, herself a former Trump White House official, showing Greenland covered with an American flag, saying soon after that was posted, President Trump repeated the claim that the U.S. needs Greenland for national security reasons. The Danish Prime Minister responded to this in an interview earlier today, as reported by Bloomberg, quote, "I believe one should take the American president seriously when he says it wants Greenland, but I will also make it clear that if the U.S. chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops, including NATO, and thus the security that has been established since the end of the Second World War." Can you rule out that the U.S. is ever going to try to take Greenland by force?
Well, let me go back a step. The president has been clear for months now, so I know you're treating this as breaking news. The president has been clear for months now that the United States should be the nation that has Greenland as part of our overall security apparatus. The United
Right, but
States,
your wife posted that like hours after the Venezuela operation.
Yeah,
that's why it's newly relevant.
No, and I'll talk with you about it for an hour. I think it's a really important conversation. I just wanted to reset, Jake, by making clear that it has been the formal position of the U.S. government since the beginning of this administration, frankly, going back into the previous Trump administration, that Greenland should be part of the United States. The president has been very clear about that. That is the formal position of the U.S. government.
Right, but can you say that military action against Greenland is off the table?
Military action against Greenland. The Greenland has a population of 30,000 people, Jake. The real question is, by what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? What is the basis of their territorial claim? What is their basis of having Greenland as a colony of Denmark? The United States is the power of NATO. For the United States to secure the Arctic region, to protect and defend NATO and NATO interests, obviously Greenland should be part of the United States. And so that's a conversation that we're going to have as a country. That's a process we're going to have as a community of nations.
So you can't take it off the table that the U.S. would use military force to seize Greenland. You can't take it off the table.
Jake, I understand you're trying very hard to, which again is your job. I respect it. It's great to get exactly the headline, right? That catchy headline.
I'm trying to get an answer
that says Miller refuses to rule out the United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
Need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry.
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil companies.
We also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela in 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime.
Trump was pretty clear yesterday. He said the United States is going to run Venezuela. Under what legal authority?
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine on their oil. That means their economy will not be able to move forward until the conditions that are in the national interest of the United States and the interest of the Venezuelan people are met. And that's what we intend to do. So that leverage remains, that leverage is ongoing, and we expect that it's going to lead to results here. We're hopeful that it does, positive results for the people of Venezuela, but ultimately, most importantly for us, in the national interest of the United States. We will no longer have, hopefully, as we move forward here, we'll set the conditions so that we no longer have in our hemisphere a Venezuela that's the crossroads for many of our adversaries around the world, including Iran and Hezbollah, is no longer sending us drug gangs, is no longer sending us drug boats, is no longer a narco-trafficking paradise for all those drugs coming out of Colombia to going through the Caribbean and towards the United States. And obviously, we want a better future for the people of Venezuela. We want them to have an oil industry where the wealth goes to the people, not to a handful of corrupt individuals and stolen by pirates all over the world. That's what we're working towards, and we intend to use the leverage we have to help achieve that.
Let me ask the question again. What is the legal authority for the for the United States to be running Venezuela?
Well, I explained to you what our goals are and how we're going to use the leverage to make it happen. As far as what our legal authority is on the quarantine, I'm very simple. We have court orders. These are sanctioned boats, and we get orders from courts to go after and seize these sanctions.
Compare what he's been saying lately in the last few days about foreign interventions to the kinds of things he said previously when it comes to the campaign trail and as he was running for office.
Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you. We believe that the job of the United States military is not to wage endless regime change wars. You have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. The cartels are running Mexico, whether you like it or not. It's not nice to say, but the cartels are running Mexico. We will stop racing to topple foreign, and you understand this, foreign regimes that we know nothing about, that we shouldn't be involved with.
Even though there's been protesters killed in Iran.
If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States. Regime change in Iraq, regime change in Libya, regime change in Syria, and every other globalist disaster for half a century. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security, and Denmark is not going to be able to do it. We're getting out of the nation building business and instead focusing on creating stability in the world. The American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Stupid foreign wars in countries that you've never heard of. This Tuesday is your chance to stand up and declare that you're not going to take.
I told you it was about oil, but what if I told you the U.S. just stole $1 trillion in silver while everyone was watching the wrong headline? It was not a war, it was a resource extraction op. Look, less than 24 hours after the U.S. invaded Venezuela, a deal was inked. A new $8 billion silver smelter facility financed by JP Morgan, jointly owned by the Department of Defense to process Venezuelan silver. Why? Because JP Morgan was underwater on a physical silver short worth billions. They did not invade for oil, they invaded to bail out the bank. Comment scroll if you're ready for the real blueprint. I'll scan your scroll and remind you how you already won. But Venezuela sits on the Arco Minero, trillions in unmined gold and silver. JP Morgan gets caught rigging silver, pays $1 billion in fines, and now they just buy the smelter and rewrite the rules. And they did it with your tax money. The US military didn't just topple a regime, they cleared the path to mine collateral for a failing financial system. Comment scroll to decode your wealth timeline. What's coming next will crush the unprepared. Look, silver just crossed $75 per ounce. Physical silver is trading near and above $100 per ounce depending on where you live in the world, but JP Morgan and COMEX are still manipulating paper prices. Meanwhile, crude oil.
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard Ojeda here, and I need you to stay with me. You need to hear this. I served 24 years in the United States Army, and I can tell you right now that the attack on Venezuela this morning feels really familiar as a combat veteran that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. On my back, I carry the names of brothers who never made it home from war because our government told us that there was weapons of mass destruction that did not actually exist. They sent America's sons and daughters into a war zone so they could topple a dictator that was supposed to have those weapons of mass destruction. This morning, the Trump administration bombed the capital of Venezuela with no congressional approval, violating war powers to give away Venezuelan oil to Exxon under the guise of liberation. And I know what comes next. because I've seen it. I've seen what happens when politicians light the fuse and don't have a plan for the chaos that follows, because I lived that reality when I led troops into battle in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Trump administration says this is about drugs. Give me a damn break. This is the same president who just pardoned one of the largest drug traffickers in the entire world less than a month ago. And just today, he openly stated, we're going to run Venezuela, occupying a sovereign nation until a new government is in place. The truth is, this attack is about power. It's about oil. It's about a regime change. I know what it's like to look an 18-year-old in the eyes who's afraid to die on a battlefield. Donald Trump and his administration don't care about our sons and daughters that will lace up their boots and head off to war in the name of patriotism and ultimately die because of corruption and greed. They don't know the weight that it carries when you have to pick up a phone and tell a mother that her son is never coming home. I do. My wife Kelly does. Thousands of service members who have draped the flag and carried their brother's casket to its final resting place does. And we will not sit silent. They say this is the end of the escalation. I call bullshit, because I've seen this con job before. They beat the war drums. They promise it'll be quick, and then they feed you lies. The next thing you know, you're in a forever war that costs millions of lives for the next 20 years. I don't want another forever war. I don't want more Gold Star families. I don't want America's sons and daughters dying to satisfy the greed of corrupt politicians and their donors.
Tell me what you think about this topic. Subscribe and leave me your comments. And if you have not already, like, share, subscribe, and join me next time for another discussion with Dena. Ta-ta!
This concludes your daily discussions with Dena. Join us Monday through Friday at 12:30 p.m. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment.